So I'm Dave Golan. I'm currently a teacher at Eskdale. I was in quite seriously ill with COVID right at the start.
And I'm Emma, Dave's wife. So I was in lockdown whilst Dave was in hospital and in intensive care. Been together 25 years since we were 15.
Yeah, got together at school.
And we've been married 17 years this year. So a while, yeah.
So it was right at the very start, very early on, and I'd sort of been feeling unwell, but managing at home, and then sort of, I suppose it got progressively worse, and then I seemed to be okay, but you were convinced that there was something amiss.
Yeah.
Just wasn't sort of as well as I should have been, and then obviously we went through 111, didn't we? Phoned them, went through, and their advice was that I was all right and stay at home. I think because I was presenting okay, and I didn't feel particularly breathless, that it came across as being okay. But actually, then we'd made the decision, didn't we, to phone, and the ambulance came and took me sats, and they weren't impressive, to say the least. So I was
59% is SATs.
Yeah,
So it should be in the 90s.
So it was blue lighted in quite quickly. Yeah, and that was it. Honestly, yeah, my darling wife. No, but it is absolutely. And that's another thing. Thing about people who've been in COVID. People say, you have to stay positive, and a positive mindset absolutely is the thing. Because when I was really under, and I remember essentially imagining now within this sort of forest, all foggy and all the rest of it, and it's sort of like this, your brain going, you're stuck here at the moment. And I could hear voices on the edge of that, and I knew it was her, and I knew it was my daughter. Couldn't tell you what they said, but I knew it was them, and that was the thing that drove me the whole way through. Was that I couldn't. You're right.
Go on.
I couldn't die because I had them there, and I couldn't do it to them, and that was it. There was no thought in my mind other than that. It was like, I can't do this because they're too important. I can't leave them on their own. And that was the major driving force, and that I hope that's the thing that pulls me through, because I wasn't leaving them. It wasn't an option.
I think that the hearing my voices was possibly as on speakerphone.
Yeah.
Because the nurses used to keep his phone charged for me, and they used to lay it on his pillow, and me and Lydia would speak to him on a morning, and then we'd speak to him on a night as well. So we think that's maybe what he was listening to.
And then the day you gave me a telling off.
Oh yeah.
When it was getting really hairy.
Yeah. They told me to tell you off, and said, you need to give him a stern talking to, and I really did.
And it worked.
It must have done, because you'd improved overnight.
Yeah.
That's probably more to do with the dialysis machine though, because it took a lot of fluid.
Well.
Rather than me telling you off, but you never know.
Take your time.
So, obviously, we had we've got a daughter, and she was 5 at the time. So, we weren't allowed anywhere near the hospital at that point. There was no visiting at all for any reason whatsoever. And I had asked quite early on and said, if as things got worse, because they did, after about sort of 10 days, things really sort of took a turn for the worse, to the point where the consultant had rang me one night and said that they didn't expect him to survive during the night, and they were just going to take it hour by hour. And I asked the question, if he wasn't to survive, or if you thought he was going to imminently pass away, would I be allowed to come in and sit with him? And the answer was no. And it was, he would have had to sort of pass away on his own. And I think that night was probably the worst, because the little girl, she was in my bed with me, and I just remember looking at her and thinking, God, how am I going to tell her that in the morning? So yeah, it was really hard, scary. And as you can see, it's still raw now. This is the thing I was saying, it's even sort of 4 years later, it's really, really hard to talk about. I think when you have somebody really poorly, the feeling of being out of control is hard enough. But usually you sat with them at the bedside, so you're able to sort of see what's going on. And being at home and not knowing from 1 minute to the next, and obviously, the staff were amazing. If they didn't get a chance to ring me on the breaks, on the shift, they would ring me on the breaks and sit and talk to me. But obviously they were in full PPE, so it wasn't just a mask, it was, they had
Everything.
Full body suits, mask, sometimes a bigger mask over the top of that, and trying to understand what they were saying. And as such, when you desperately want to know what's happening, it was just really, really, really difficult. I think trying to explain it is, I don't think words really do it justice.
Like we've talked about this a lot, haven't we? That we both lived two sides of a very different, very different sides of the same coin, and like I get everything that went on, but I can't possibly understand what it's like to have been in.
And I can't for you. It was the same.
No.
So it's changed us forever, and I don't think you can go through something like that ever be the person that you were before. But it's important to talk about it, and not to relive it or sort of live in the past, but just acknowledge that it's happened, and certain things that have come out of it. You come out of an experience like that a little bit more scared. Life seems a lot more fragile, because you are just like everybody else. You sort of, I worked here, Dave worked at the school, we still does work at the school, but you drop your kids off at work, you come into work and everything, you just take it for granted that you get home and your husband's there and everything's going to be the same as it always is, and then you're just left with this reality that actually life can change in minutes and everything can be taken away from you. So I think that it leaves you a little bit more scared about life in general, really. But yeah, we do talk about it.
One is the absolute care that everybody gave me was just phenomenal. Just to know that you're like, and to feel that's safe in people's hands. It's a very unusual position to be in for somebody who is normally able-bodied and reasonably fit and healthy, but to be in such a position where you're so dependent on the people around you for literally everything, it's quite humbling.
But I think the biggest thing for me is the kindness of the staff, because I remember thinking, even there was a couple of consultants that used to ring me, but not just to update me on Dave, and the nursing staff were the same. They would ask about me and they would say, how are you? Have you looked after yourself today? Have you been able to sleep? Have you eaten okay? They were concerned about my well-being as well, and that it wasn't just words either. You could tell that they were really concerned, and the nursing staff really, like I said, taking their time to. If they didn't, they were so unbelievably busy, and you can imagine being at home and you're trying to find a balance between wanting to know exactly what's going on, but also not to the point where you're making sort of a nuisance of yourself. Nobody ever made me feel like I was a nuisance, and always made time for me. And like I said earlier, even if they didn't have time on the shift, they would ring me on their breaks. They would spend their break time updating me on his condition, and I think that's probably the the biggest thing is the fact that they really probably don't realise how much they pulled me through the situation.
They're heroes because they saved my life. I don't care what job they're supposed to have done. That, to me, they'll always be held in that esteem, you know, because without them I wouldn't be here, yeah.
Just probably the same sentiments as Dave. I think it's important, you know, when you they saved Dave's life, but actually, essentially they saved my abilities as well, because without him, you know, we wouldn't have had much of a quality life anyway, so thank you.